Hey everybody, let's talk about the North American porcupine. Now, here in North America, we just generally call this the porcupine. But I do want you to know that there are some other porcupines in the world. And in fact, it's certainly clear that porcupineism, the adaptation that makes porcupines porcupines, those quills, evolved twice. Once here in the New World, like where the North American porcupine is, and there are also porcupines in the Old World. I've seen porcupine in Asia, and I've seen porcupine in Africa, including this guy right here. So this was in our first trip to East Africa. This was in 2011, and this was the first porcupine I'd ever seen alive in Africa, and it was followed quickly by the first porcupine I ever saw dead in Africa. Let me just give you a little scene of what's going on here. So this is a hyena that has just dug this porcupine out of its burrow. That is correct. The porcupines that live in other places in the world often live underground. And the porcupine that I just showed you, he's still alive, or she is back here hiding in the brush, and it was forced out of its home by this hyena that dug into it and was able to finally maneuver this porcupine's mate out. Once he got this porcupine meal out, he had to chase off other hyenas in order to get a meal. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, a lioness came in and she ended up stealing the kill from him. The whole scene was absolutely crazy. There were so many players in this. There were vultures. There were bats that had been living in the porcupine burrow that now were all flying around us. And here we are in the Serengeti National Park, maybe the most famous national park in all of Africa, and we are literally by ourselves. It's the kind of place where it's so big, if you just go to the places everybody goes to, you can be surrounded. If you go off on your own, like our guide chose to do this day, well, you can be rewarded with something truly special. My favorite quote of this entire day was our guide, who understatedly said numerous times, "It is not a good day to be a porcupine." Anyway, you may recall earlier in the semester I showed you a picture of this scene. It was a different photo, but it was this lioness walking away from us with the porcupine in her mouth, and we talked about her foot pattern. And now you can clearly see that the hyenas are following her, hoping to get some scraps, some leftovers after she's eaten all that she needs to. Okay, enough of that African side quest there. We're going to look at the North American porcupine and two things on this slide. First, I promised you that when I showed you a picture in captivity, I would claim that for you. And this porcupine on the right here, I did take that picture, but it's in a zoo. The reason for that is I think wildlife photographers should be very honest about their photos and not try to misrepresent them. So it's still an adorable photo. It still shows something about the animal, but I did want you to know that I got this picture because I paid an admission fee, not because of my stealth and cunning. And then, what did Elbrock say is the question I keep asking you. For those of you that are keeping up with the reading, I really believe you're getting a whole lot more out of this because you're becoming much more of an expert on each one of these species and learning some fascinating tidbits about them. I also want to keep trying to incorporate the vocabulary terms that we had learned earlier in the semester, including scansorial claws. Do you recall what those are? Yep, those are sharp claws for climbing. So you would have to imagine that porcupines are good climbers if they're going to be eating the bark off of trees, and they do so with these super long, sharp claws. I would like to share a term with you, not something that you have to write down unless you really love obscure trivia, but a baby porcupine is called a porcupet. And I don't know how old they are when they stop using that term for them, but this is clearly a very young porcupine that I have here. Must have been born this year. You can tell a young porcupine because they look so fuzzy. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about just the longest hairs that they have, but even underneath that, there's just a softer quality to them and a slightly constant startled look that they have. Like everything is a bit of a shock to them. Like maybe I just woke up and I'm not quite sure what's happening because I haven't had my coffee yet. That's the look of a young porcupine. Now, I did mention that they eat the bark off of trees, and that shouldn't be a surprise to you because it was in the reading. And here is what feeding sign looks like from a porcupine. Now, I have a little pet peeve here, and if you've been following along in the videos, I got a heck of a lot of pet peeves. This is called barking. When you take the bark off of a tree, it's called barking. I don't. It shouldn't be called debarking. If barking is taking the bark off, then debarking would literally be putting the bark back on. So these trees have been barked. This one is quite old, and you can see how the wood underneath here is all faded. This one is quite fresh, and you can see that sappy quality that it has, that yellowish wood because the sap is still running from here. And this is the kind of bark that nobody else would really want to eat. When I say nobody, can you just put some air quotes around that? Like very few mammals are going to be able to handle eating conifer bark because of the sap content. Quite honestly. So where beaver are attacking trees at the base to cut them down so they can access the bark, porcupines are climbing trees and getting at them. That's not to say they won't strip the bark close to the ground either, but because of their ability to climb, they're able to attack the tree without having to cut it down. Now I showed you those front claws on that baby porcupine. Here is a roadkill, and I just wanted to show you how long the claws are on the hind foot as well, and then just talk a little bit one more time about foot structure. This is definitely a plantigrade animal. You would not think of porcupines as fast. Like, even if you didn't know anything about porcupines other than the fact that they're covered in quills, that should be just enough to know that they're not fast. You do not invent quills and super speed, right? It's one or the other. So we expect them to be built for walking. We expect them to be slow walkers, not fast runners. But I also wanted to show you this pebbled surface that it has. Each one of these little round spots right here is a place where it can grab traction and hold on for dear life. And that's their job, man. I got to be able to climb, and I got to be able to get back down. And not that falls don't happen, but I would like to minimize them as much as possible. Last thing I'll say about this is I often show this picture, and people's immediate reaction is it looks like a monkey or a gorilla. Well, the truth is that monkeys and gorillas don't have big, sharp claws like that. So I get it. I understand why people say that, but I want you to be a little more sophisticated than people, right? Cool. My wife and I took a trip a couple years ago in order to experience a lot of things. But one of the main things that I had on my agenda was to get photos of porcupines. And we went to a place called Forian National Park. So let me just circle that for you here and show you where we started. This is about where Seneca Falls is. So it wasn't just a casual day trip, right? We had to actually plan this and get there on purpose. And I just think it's kind of funny, and I really do want to make a point here that I'm sure there's many of you out there that are saying, who in the world would ever go on vacation to go get pictures of porcupine? Well, this weird looking guy right here is your answer. I didn't have enough good porcupine pictures, and we were hoping to see bears, which we did not. We were hoping to see moose, which we did, beaver, and then we did some whale watching as well. So we got to see seals and porpoise and whales also. So it was a great adventure. We saw lots of cool stuff. We did a lot of hiking, but really I was super excited for porcupines. And if you haven't seen yet, there's a porcupine here in the picture, and then there's actually one over here. As much as I wanted to get pictures of porcupines, the only porcupine that we ever saw in a tree was that very first one that I showed you, the scansorial photo there. All my other porcupine pictures from this place came from porcupines grazing in the lawn. Now, porcupines are mostly browsers, but if you create a lawn for them, right? Can I just go back? If you're going to mow this for me, I'm going to come out and I'm going to eat. So I didn't get the iconic photos of porcupines that I really wanted. I was hoping they were going to be stripping bark and, up in a nice pine tree or something. Instead, I got them grazing in a lawn. And so there's certainly plant eaters. There's something on your note template there that says what do they eat. So we have bark, but there certainly would go for greens if they're available. It's just not normally what's available to them. And I did want to show you something. Do you remember? Did you do the muskrat one already? Yeah, most of you should have seen that. Can you look in this guy's eyeball here? So we're looking at the reflection. So the top half of his eye is reflecting the sky. The bottom half is reflecting the lawn. And then there's this giant white thing in the middle there. That's actually this lighthouse. So the whole reason for this lawn was for people to come and be able to hike to this historic lighthouse and learn about the history of this whole area and the people that used to live here and yada yada yada. And the porcupines every evening were like, "Thank you very much for the grass. We appreciate it. We know it's for us." So here I am with this giant telephoto lens and my big expensive camera and laying in the grass getting pictures of porcupines. So this is a picture that I took with my big camera. And that last picture and this one right here were photos that I took with my cell phone. See, in a national park, I'm not saying it's appropriate to approach every animal in the world, but when you're laying there in the grass and a porcupine wants to walk by you, I didn't see any reason to move. He was cool with me. I was cool with him. I got a few pictures. Didn't bother each other, and it was just quite an experience. They kind of when they chew, they sort of. It sounds like they're so enjoying themselves. They're like almost humming to themselves or as they're chewing there. Don't ever tell anybody I try to imitate a porcupine enjoying his food. Let's have a look at these two pictures again if I can go backwards. So I want to talk about their quills for most of the rest of the presentation here. But to get to the quills, you got to get past these long hairs first. See, quills are actually hairs. So if I take a quill and I chemically analyze it, it is exactly the same as a hair. It's a badass hair, right? It's really cool, great adaptation, but it's a hair nonetheless. These other hairs the porcupines have, these long ones here, are called guard hairs, and they do act to guard them, and I will explain that in just a moment. But look how when this guy's walking, he's got a lot of guard hairs and he's got a lot of them up. And look at how this individual is clearly a different guy. He hardly has any guard hairs. I wasn't quite sure what was happening. I don't know if he was just molting or shedding or what was the deal. I'm going to show you two photos that I did not take. I inherited these from Bill, and these are all the way out from Colorado. And he encountered a porcupine. And I just tells a good story here and helps us get rid of some porcupine myths. So as Bill approached this porcupine actually raised his guard hairs up. Can you see that? It looks like he just got out of the dryer, doesn't it? Little static cling going on there. But they have the ability to raise and lower their hairs like other animals do. Maybe you've heard the expression raise your hackles. A wolf will be able to raise the hair on its hackles, on its shoulders and its neck in order to make himself look bigger and threatening. So maybe this guy here has all of the same guard hairs the other guy has, but he's chosen to relax them. He's got them all down. He's not one bit bothered by how close I am to him. This guy is bothered. By having those guard hairs all erect like that, he's literally using them as a guard. So he can't see all the way around him. So if this predator comes at him and he thinks maybe Bill's a predator of some sort, the predator will have to touch those guard hairs, giving the porcupine a little bit of a warning that the predator is right there on top of him. So that's what's meant by, quote, guard hairs. They actually act as guards, sounding the alarm. Other animals that have guard hairs, like beaver, they guard against weather and wear and mud, sort of thing. Here's the porcupine after Bill's really crossed in. He's really too close now. You can see that not only are the guard hairs still up, but the quills now have moved. He's got the quills all laid out. It makes this bold black and white pattern here, which is the last warning that a predator has that you better stay away or you're going to get a face full of porcupine love here. And I know that a lot of people have this myth about porcupines, this belief that they can shoot their quills. They absolutely 100% cannot. They can raise and lower them because they have muscles that attach their hairs to their body. Ooh, who remembers when we talked about shrews and moles that they do not have those muscles? That's pretty cool. But they cannot shoot their quills. In addition, their quills are not venomous. There's no poison tip dart here. So those are the two big myths that I want to make sure everybody has clear in their mind, and make sure you're going to be a porcupine expert here and not believe those. So if that's true, if this porcupine cannot shoot his quills, then I'd like to talk about this picture a little bit of detail here. I took this off of the internet. All right. Yeah, I usually get a strong reaction to this. So if you're bothered by this, I apologize. This will only take a moment here. Let me just go to this one. And we must be at the vet's office here. You see the stainless steel table in the background. Again, like I said, I just took these off the internet. This is not a dog that bit a porcupine. This is a dog that bit a porcupine repeatedly, right? You cannot get this kind of quill in you from one little encounter. This dog just didn't know when to give up. Probably does now. So I need to show you, I actually have to get off of that picture because I don't want to gross everybody out. I need to show you a magnification of a porcupine quill. This is what makes it so hard for porcupine quills to come out. They go in super easy because they're sharp, but they don't come out very easily because they're barbed. Look at all these little projectiles that come down, just like on a fish hook or a Christmas tree. And you go in, but as you try to be pulled back out again, you would catch on all of these things and it would make it very difficult to do so. If that's true, okay, that the quills stick in there, how would an animal in the wild lose porcupine quills? Well, they would have to literally work them out themselves, or they just don't. Like they could be in a place where they're not able to get them out, or they can try hard and not be able to get it. And many of those quills that get into wild animals end up migrating deeper and deeper into the body. And I wonder if that's part of where the myth about porcupines being able to shoot their quills comes from. Like imagine you're a trapper, right? And it's like the 1750s, and you're skinning out a fox or a mountain lion or something, and you find a porcupine quill embedded in the muscle. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to invent a microscope and then look and find these barbs and then conclude what happened? Or are you going to ask yourself, what is the muzzle velocity of a porcupine quill, right? They can be so deep in an animal's body that they look like they've been shot into there. That leads me to another question. Porcupine quills must be loosely enough attached to the skin that they come off in the predator's face. But if that was true, wouldn't their quills fall off all the time? Is everybody following me here, or are you just staring at me one more time holding a dead animal without wearing a glove? I don't know if you know who Berna is. She's a technician in the department. She runs the greenhouse. She works mostly with horticulture students, so if you haven't met her yet, maybe you will someday. She picked up a roadkill porcupine and brought it in, and we laid it on a stainless steel table, and I took some photos of it, and we talked about the anatomy. And I chose to show you a picture of the tail here because this porcupine suffered from a little bit of road rash after it was hit by a car. So what you're looking at is the skin of the porcupine after thousands of his quills have been scraped off on the road. And I don't mean to be gross, the porcupine died instantly sort of thing, but this is a great way to show how the quills actually attach to the body. And I promise you, I grabbed that tail with the utmost delicacy and I moved my hand only in the same direction the quills were going. And I snapped this picture and turned to Berna and I said, Berna, take this quill out of my finger. And she's like, I'm kind of grossed out. I said, come on, woman, you got to take this out. So it's not even one of the big quills, right? It's just this tiny little quill. And I hope you can tell in this picture, I'm going to kind of outline it here for you, that she is tugging as hard as she can. Can you see the little white area underneath the quill there? She is pulling and pulling and pulling, and that quill just won't come out. And finally, she's like, I can't do it. This is gross. And I said, come on, you got to really pull. And she yanked that sucker out. And look at how much it's bleeding here. This is this tiny little quill. If that was a pinprick, it wouldn't bleed like this. It comes out and it leaves a jagged hole because of where all of those barbs were on the quill. Hero, maybe I'll let you decide that, but I did bleed for you guys. That's the one thing I can tell you for sure. So how does this all happen? This picture doesn't relate to it. I just don't want you staring at my bloody finger anymore. How is it possible that they're loosely enough attached to come free in some predator's face, but they don't just fall out like the guy's going bald all the time? The answer is each one of those quills is attached with a little spring-like muscle, and the muscle holds that quill tight until the spring gets pushed down. So imagine the face of that poor dog or some other wild animal, a fisher, for example, grabs a hold of that porcupine, and each one of those quills that's touching his face gets pushed down. The springy muscle gets compressed and it breaks. And when the porcupine moves away and the fisher pulls back its face, all of those quills stay stuck